welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sneha and welcome to the August wrap up. So August was a weird month for me. In the beginning I read a lot, but then the last couple of weeks everything took a nosedive. Reading, my mental health, life, everything was just bleh, and that took over my reading progress. So I pretty much did not read anything in the last couple of weeks. So most of the books that I've read have been in the first 2 weeks, and because I was on vacation also, I was in Pondicherry for the extended weekend, so I managed to get the reading done in the first half itself. So yeah, excuse the background noise, it's Ganpati in Mumbai and it's chaos. I can't help it. There's going to be noise all through the day, and it's probably going to be the least amount of noise in the day, so let's just go with it. My first book that I finished was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This is a historical fiction slash a lit fic book. So it follows the life of Elizabeth. So it follows the life of Elizabeth Zott, who is trained as a chemist in the 1960s, and she faces a lot of hardship and a lot of sexism because of the nature of that industry and how male dominated it is. Cut to, she is a single mother of a young girl called Mad, like her full name is Madeline, but she becomes Mad, and she also now has a TV show which is called Lessons in Chemistry, where she talks about cooking, but she also imparts like chemistry lessons and also like kind of like life lessons, and she becomes a hero for a lot of housewives and a lot of women of that day. This book I mentioned quite a bit in my last few videos. This was part of a haul that I had recently done, and it was also part of my predicted 5-star reads video, which I'll link up above. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I had been looking forward to this book a lot. I thought it, because of the praise that I saw from all various people online, I expected this to be nothing short of a 4 or a 5-star read, but unfortunately I did not like this book. I think primarily I had an issue with how the sexism faced by Elizabeth was portrayed in this book. It was very much in your face, and I'm sure, you know, being a woman in academic circles in the 1960s was a tough journey, but I think there could have been a more subtler, a more meaningful way to depict it rather than straight up blunt force trauma words used, which it just did not sit right with me. Another thing that I hated is that Elizabeth meets this young scientist called Calvin, and they fall madly in love, like they're soulmates and nobody else for each other type of love, and I hated Calvin. I hated how condescending and how very authoritative he was. It was very subtle in the way that the character was portrayed, but I just hated how controlling that he was of Elizabeth's life. So I just hated Calvin, and I hated the book until Calvin was present in the book. Later on he passes away and she becomes a single mother, and later on only Elizabeth gets to interact with normal people who don't have the kind of IQ and the kind of intellectual ability that she does. She meets regular people who are nice to her, and that is when I liked Elizabeth also, because she was so much more nicer as a character. Another thing I found extremely cringy was the fact that there is a dog in this book whose name is 630. Don't ask me why. And the dog has these insightful thoughts about human beings. I know a lot of people on the internet found it very cute. I did not. I just found it very cringy, and it just added to the cringe factor of this book. I think I was just very, very disappointed with the writing style and the characterization and just the overall nature, essence of the book as well. So yeah, unfortunately this was overhyped in my opinion, and I rated this only 2.5 stars out of 5. And I finished my non-fiction read for the month, which is Remnants of Separation by Anchal Malhotra. This was part of an Instagram non-fiction read-along that I'm part of, and we read, I think, one non-fiction every 40 days. And this was our pick for July and August, August being India's partition month. This is a partition book which is unlike most other partition books, I would think. because it seeks to tell the stories of people affected by partition, both on both sides of the border, India and Pakistan, but through material memory. So the author visits various people and the heirlooms that they've managed to keep from their time across the border, or what has remained with them after the separation. Just these, they can be everyday objects, they can be priceless objects, they can be just like memories, anything. She seeks to tell the stories of these people through material memory, and I found that extremely different and a very unique perspective among the whole horde of partition literature that we have. Personally, I don't have anything directly linking me to the partition because I grew up in the south of India. My entire family is from the south of India, so we were very much removed from the partition and the trauma that a lot of North Indians had to go through. So I always had a very outside in perspective, and it was a very academic textbook kind of perspective on what happened and how people were affected. I don't have the kind of intergenerational perspective and trauma that a lot of other people might have. So I was always curious to learn more about it. And what I loved about this book is that it's a very objective take on that. It's just talking about how people were affected by it. There was no bias, there was no seeking to retell history. There were facts that were said in this book, particularly about the British, about certain politicians who wanted certain things to be their way. There were facts, there were historical facts, but they were very much removed from the trauma and the personal anecdotes that the author has managed to gather. So because of that, I really, really loved this book, and because of that, I find an interest in learning more about the partition, about reading more about such stories. The author has just put out a new book which talks about the partition impact on second generation, third generation families, people who might not have felt the direct impact but more intergenerational, and I'm really interested to pick it up. So yeah, overall I loved this book, and particularly I loved the discussion that we had after finishing this book. It was very heartfelt, I think. So absolutely love this book. I rated this 5 stars out of 5. Just like every other person on the internet, I think. Then the next book that I finished was Diary of an Ordinary Woman by Margaret Foster. I picked this up in the book fair. I have a haul video on that which I'll link up above if you're interested. But this is a book told entirely in the form of diary entries of an ordinary woman living in London, I think from the start of the 20th century until like 92, 93. The weird part was only after finishing the very last page did I realize that this is not based on a real live woman. This is a fictional story. Only then did I come back and see that at the edge of the opening title page it says a novel, so clearly it's fiction, but I did not realize it while reading it. I think that's the beauty of it as well, because it could have been the story of anybody. It's just what a normal woman living in that very turbulent century felt. It was very personal, it was very biased, of course, I'm not gonna lie, but it was a very in-depth view into what somebody living through that century was feeling, what they were going through. So the character's name is Millicent, and overall she is a good narrator, I would say. She did a good job in capturing the events of the century and so on and so forth, but she does come across as a very snobby character. She has certain derisive things to say about fat people or poor people and all of this, which are a bit too much on the nose, I would think. Another thing was there were a whole host of characters that were introduced throughout the books, like her friends, her sisters, but somehow the author had a knack of making these characters very likable in the beginning. Like somebody's ambitious, somebody's very sweet, somebody's very like a go-getter person, and then there's a turn which comes among all these characters, particularly woman characters, and they all become unlikable. Like somebody is ambitious and then suddenly they're like this frivolous party girl. Somebody is clever and smart and then suddenly they're like very shady. Somebody is open-minded and very open-minded older sister, and suddenly she's very like religious and judgmental, and they just this treatment is given out to all the woman characters, and I don't know why the author chose to do that. And I realized this only after closing the book and like reflecting on why she turned all these seemingly likable characters in the beginning. So that is, I didn't enjoy that. Like, why would you do that to your woman characters? I don't know. Also, like, the Millicent's main love interest is a man who is very like controlling, and he is very opinionated. He does not like Millicent's own opinions, and still Millicent and that guy have like a great relationship. So I didn't like that guy also. And also, towards the ending of the book, what happens is that Millicent is like a 70-year-old woman, and throughout her life we are only told that she's very independent. She never marries. She has all these like certain ideas about her life and how she wants to lead it, and she won't compromise on that. And towards the end, her life takes a backseat. She becomes like this recorder of memories of her niece's journey. Like, her niece becomes like this activist sort of a person, and we are just told her life. And I did not like that. I mean, just because this woman is now 70, the author decides that she has no life for herself, and she begins to document like the life of a 20-year-old living in 1980s or whatever. So I hated that part also. So overall, I feel like I've griped about this book a lot, but I did enjoy it while reading it. So I'm going to rate it like 3 stars out of 5, and just move on. So yeah. Next book that I finished was The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I've been meaning to read this book for the longest time, and I finally caved and bought it on Amazon during one of their like sale thingies. This is like a historical fiction / suspense / horror kind of a book. What happens is that there is a young woman called Viv Delaney in 1982 in upstate New York. So she's working like this night shift at like this creepy motel, and suddenly she disappears. Like, nobody can find her, and she eventually she gets written off as dead. Then her niece comes along in 2017. Due to a personal tragedy or whatever, her niece comes to that very same old town, and she wants to find out what happened to her aunt. So she goes to that same motel. She begins that same shift in a quest to find out what happened to her missing aunt, and what events happened on that one fateful day. She realizes that something creepy is going on in the motel, and then there's like a whole host of supernatural things which happen in that motel as well. So yeah, this is a more of a suspense, thriller, horror kind of a book. There are creepy things which happen in the motel, like unexplained supernatural things, and there's also like a missing person, murder mystery, serial killer kind of a vibe also. So you're like kind of playing into 2 genres and that's why I think it becomes a little predictable. Like, I mean, there's no exceptional plot to this book. It's your basic murder mystery, thriller, serial killer kind of a vibe. There's nothing which stands out. It was a good time while reading it because you get some creepy feelings, and that's very good when you're on a vacation and you don't want to read serious books. So that was good, but overall I was a little bit let down because I remember reading great reviews for this online, on Goodreads, on Amazon, etc. So I was a little let down, I'm not gonna lie. And the last book that I finished for the month was 5 Tuesdays in Winter by Lily King. This was the audiobook that I finished, and this is a set of short stories. There's no particular theme, it's just people, it's just emotions, it's just trauma and stuff like that. It's just stories about people, and I think I read Lily King last year when I finished her book Writers and Lovers, a little bit late into the year, I think like October, November, and I loved her book and I wanted to read anything and everything that this woman ever writes. So I was really excited to finish reading this, and I was not disappointed. There were a few stories in this book that really stood out. Particularly there was one story about a bookseller, and because, well, I love anything and everything to do with like booksellers and bookshops and all of this, I love that story. It was a story of a bookseller, and he's a single father, and he falls in love with someone who's working at his bookstore. So a lot of like hidden glances and like subtext and like a lot of shyness and attraction and all of that, and I loved it. It was very, very cute. It was very, very wholesome. There was another story which absolutely broke my heart. It was a story about a woman and her daughter, and she's recently widowed and the child has recently lost her father, and they decide to go on this vacation. So both of them are kind of like dealing with this loss that has just happened, and particularly the woman is worried about her daughter and how she's dealing with it and all of that. And they go on this vacation and they meet this another family with a set of young kids, and the girl starts to babysit these young children, and something happens, and just, I don't want to spoil it, but just how that ending and how the book dealt with it, I gasped, I almost cried, it broke my heart. I really loved that story. I think it could be a novel in itself, and I would still read it. And also the last story was a very like, the hell did I just read kind of a story. It was the story of this it was a story of a writer who's a mother, who's like a recent mother, like she has a young baby and she's trying to like finish a book, and then there's a knock at the door and the stranger comes in and he's like, I'm from the publishing house and I am here to talk about your book. And she's like, what book? I haven't finished it yet, I'm still writing it. And he's like, no, you finished it. And like there's this whole series of like weird things which happen, and the ending of that is just like, what did I just read? And I loved it. Like the best way to end an anthology of short stories, I think. The shock factor and just like the surprise factor, loved it. So yeah, particular mention to that as well. So overall, I really loved this audiobook. Special mention to all the voices and all the voice artists who made this an incredibly enjoyable listening experience. There were so many emotions and modulations and expressions, and which was so beautifully communicated through the audiobook. I think also the commendation and the appreciation for that also goes to the author as well, because she's just so beautiful at writing, and she keeps you engaged and hooked to the page and hooked to the earphones in this format. But really loved it. I mean, Lily King for right now is 2 on 2 for me, and I'm really looking forward to read whatever she comes up with next and also read her backlist. So yeah, I think this would also be 4.5 stars for me. So yeah, those are all the books that I finished in August. Let's talk about the best and the least favorite for me. I think least favorite, no prizes for guessing, has to be Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmos. I wanted to love this so much because so many people on the internet love this so much, and I just don't get it. Like, I genuinely feel like there might be something wrong with me, but I don't get it. I found it very cringy. I found it very in the face. I did not like the characters, particularly the protagonist. I think for me, if I don't like a protagonist who is supposed to be liked by the reader, it becomes very hard for me to like a book, and that's what happened with this one. So very much let down by this book, and this was my least favorite read for the month. Talking about my best read for the month has to be Remnants of a Separation by Anchal Malhotra. I've raved about this book so much that I really loved it. Every non-fiction that I read, courtesy the book club that I'm part of, has been my favorite book of that month for me. So really great. So yeah, loved this one. It awoke the interest of reading partition literature in me, and that is worth everything and anything. So yeah, that's my best read for 2022 August. So yeah, those were all the books, and those were my best and my least favorite books for a month of August. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still around, do like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that, and I'll see you very soon.